Hey everyone, it's Brad and Josh here, and we welcome you to We'll Bring the Popcorn, the ultimate film and TV podcast.
Let's talk about some of the greatest film trilogies of all time. Now, we have a list that you and I have kind of compiled of some of our favorite trilogies, some of them that we feel are, perfect in some ways. Spoiler alert, if you've watched any episode of this podcast, you can kind of feel which one we feel is probably the most perfect, but we could talk about some that are like really good, some near misses, some that had potential to be but couldn't quite stick the ending, and some of them that are just kind of a mixed bag because there's so many different examples of trilogies that get it right and some that had potential but kind of faltered, or some that just we got three films and it was kind of a mixed bag. There's a lot of criteria into what makes a good film trilogy, but we can kind of start it off with some honorable mentions that I think you and I both kind of agree on. The films like the Austin Powers trilogy that we feel like the first film is incredible, but it got a little more ridiculous and over the top as it went on. They're still funny movies, but they're not what we consider all-time greats necessarily, but there's so many other like honorable mentions that we could think of. And what are some of the ones that you think of when you think of trilogies that are good but didn't quite necessarily get to where we were hoping they would get for three films?
As you mentioned Austin Powers, it's so fun and silly and over the top. It's one of Mike Myers' biggest roles that he's done other than doing Shrek, which I kind of put in here with Shrek being an honorable mention because the first three can be really solid, but it does have a fourth film that's technically the end of it, which I think it was a little lesser than the first three. So that one's a hard one to call a trilogy because it's technically ends with the fourth one, but now they're doing a fifth one. Right. But if you want to look at the first three, it kind of does give a almost well-rounded story between those three. But Austin Powers is great. I will throw in kind of with Austin Powers with the original Naked Gun trilogy because Leslie Nielsen just he perfected that deadpan, serious, comedic just performance that was just so fantastic. Like he owned that role, even though we enjoyed the new one, and you can go back in our archives to see what we thought about that with bringing in someone new but also continuing it on. But Leslie Nielsen was just they're not perfect, the jokes are very dated, that it has hits or misses in here, and that's kind of what these are. They have some misses and problems, or they're fun and enjoyable, but the cinematography or the writing or other things like that just don't match up to some others in there, but they're fun and enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could throw in another trilogy, and I know I'm going to get some of my friends that are going to rip me for this, but I kind of would throw Rush Hour into that category as well. Rush Hour 1 and 2, absolutely brilliant films. The third one was just kind of okay. Like, not as good as the first two. The first two were probably incredibly iconic classical comedy, buddy cop comedy films that were incredible, quotable, some much fun. I still quote some of those movies to this day. You could throw a film franchise in like that. I know with it being like Christmassy and the holidays right now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Santa Claus. Like the Santa Claus, the first one, is one of my favorite Christmas movies.
It's a near perfect Christmas movie.
Yeah, it's an amazing Christmas movie. Still very quotable. The second and the third one, definitely not up to par with the first one. And those are the kind of things that we're talking about when it comes to like honorable mentions of things that could have been good, but started off incredibly. Like that first Santa Claus film is still and will always be in my holiday rotation, but the second and third ones are, especially the third one, is definitely one that I didn't think was nearly up to par with the first one, and even the second one, which was still a step down from the first one, but still an enjoyable movie. Like I still throw that on occasionally at Christmas too.
Because I enjoyed the plot of the second one of that he needs to find a Mrs. Claus, but you throw in with like the second and third one, you have the fake Santa who's taking over the North Pole with the, creating clones of himself. And then you get Jack Frost. As much as I love Martin Short, but the Jack Frost whole storyline with that was a little, it just went overly hammy and corny with that. It also did continue with the series, which I thought the series was pretty solid. We don't know if that series is over with yet.
Correct.
They said Tim Allen's filming schedule has been a little crazy with all of his different shows and stuff, so there might still be another. So that one's it did end at 3, but then it got the continuation many years later with the series and stuff. But yeah, that one was a lot of fun. I might get a little flack for this one being in an honorable mention. Is the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy, like Hot Fuzz, The World's End, and Shaun of the Dead. I love Shaun of the Dead. It's one of my favorite films and stuff. I'm not as big of a fan of the other two. Like, I think they have their moments, and they have some good things about them, but I don't think their quality and storytelling and everything else matches up to what Shaun of the Dead was.
Yeah, Shaun of the Dead was absolutely brilliant. One of my favorite movies ever made too. Hot Fuzz, I could hit or miss on Hot Fuzz. Hot Fuzz, in my opinion, is like an okay film. Like it does. It has its funny moments and it has its good moments in there. I was not the biggest fan of The World's End, honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you. But Shaun of the Dead, absolutely brilliant, and that's kind of what we're talking about here with honorable mentions, but we can kind of move into some of the ones that we feel were definitely excellent films. It may not be S tier, but they're probably A tier trilogies and films that, for the most part, the quality was high on for all three films, and maybe have a little bit of a dip in quality in one or two of them, but overall, really excellent trilogies. And I'd be remiss if I didn't start out with one of my personal favorite trilogies of all time, which is the Captain America films. Like, I am still to this day consider Captain America: The Winter Soldier as my personal favorite MCU movie, and it's like the least comic booky kind of movie of any movie that they've made in the MCU, but I think it was so well written, well paced, well done, like an incredible film. The first one was, in my opinion, the best of the OG, like original Phase 1 Marvel superhero movies. I liked it better than Iron Man 1. Iron Man 1 was really good, but I liked it better. And then Civil War was a precursor to what we got with the like Endgame and more battling superheroes kind of thing, where it felt like a beefed up version of the Avengers as well, where you had so many characters involved in a story that could have gone off the rails very quickly and not been good, but they really stuck the landing on it. I love the Captain America trilogy of films.
Yeah, I do as well, and it's one that's kind of hard and difficult because it's all wrapped up within the MCU of
Correct.
this overarching storyline. And yeah, as you said, the first one is quite different than anything else that they really did in the MCU, because you're going back into the World Wars and you're dealing with the classic costumes, and you're dealing with Red Skull, but it just had this different feeling to it because it's set in the past and done so differently. And then you bring him back in the Winter Soldier, which still to me has the greatest villain introduction and suit. Like that first Winter Soldier suit and look with
Incredible.
Sebastian Stan just looked menacing and incredible. I think that's the best they've probably made a villain and a character look, was when they introduced the Winter Soldier into that. And it was such a fun military espionage film. And then, Civil War is a difficult one because it's enjoyable, but you're trying to take a pretty big storyline with the Civil War storyline and make it a Captain America film, which he's very important to it.
Yeah.
But you're doing all that in a single film as a third film, and there's some hit or misses in that.
Of course.
But you also have a fourth Captain America film, which didn't perform very well, which was without Chris Evans. So this is the Chris Evans Captain America trilogy in that. But overall, it was a lot of fun. I'm going to continue in the comic book realm, and I'm going to speak of two because they both kind of came out at the same time and had the same issues in the end. And that's Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy and the X-Men trilogy. So both of them had really solid first films that came out, introduced us to Tobey Maguire, gave us Hugh Jackman, as Wolverine, gave us a really good start, although Toad and Sabretooth weren't done as well in the first X-Men film. But both of them had sequels that were just far and away better than almost anything else. Like Spider-Man 2 and X-Men 2 were considered for the longest time being the two greatest sequels for comic books, and some of the best sequels of all time. And they both really fell off on the third one. Like The Last Stand for X-Men and Spider-Man 3, like Spider-Man 3 is almost a tale of two different movies. You had the darker, more serious Sandman story, and then you had the over-the-top Goblin and Venom story, and then they tried to condense and kind of put a little bit of the Dark Phoenix and a few other things in The Last Stand, and it just felt kind of phoned in. Like they both started off okay, incredible second films, and just both fell off on the third.
Yeah, I'm a little more forgiving of the Sam Raimi trilogy. Going back and watching it now, like I have a little bit more of an appreciation. I was not the big fan of the third one, honestly, when it came out. I viscerally hated that film for a long time, and I've gone back and I think I appreciate it a little bit more. Like in the last couple of years, having given that film another chance, like it's not as bad as I remember it being, but still a weaker entry. Because I agree with you, Spider-Man 2 was a phenomenal film, and had that been the kickoff of Spider-Man, would have been incredible as well. Because the first Spider-Man was okay, like it was a solid film, like you said, but that second one was incredible and amazing story. The X-Men, I would agree as well. The Last Stand was all right. It was fine, but X2, X-Men United was an incredible movie as well. Like a ton of fun. That was kind of the X-Men in their real element. Still wish we could have gotten the more comic book accurate things, which they've poked fun of in recent years, but definitely one that I feel could have really carried the entire trilogy, really, because it was such a good movie on its own. But yeah, these are two good examples of ones that started off well and hit a peak midway and definitely fell off on the third ones that were still overall really solid trilogies, and I think that as a whole it puts it up in that upper tier as far as like total of films, because the misses aren't as bad as some of the others that we mentioned before that were significantly worse third films, especially because it's so hard to nail that third one, and when we get to our perfect one, we'll see why we feel like it's perfect as well, because you do have that incredible landing that you stick at the end, which could, in some cases, I would even argue is the best film of the three. Like, it's so hard to get that out of a trilogy when you're building a continuous story like that. But these are all really solid examples so far, for sure.
Yeah, Spider-Man 2 was one of the first ones that gave me the big chill moment in theaters when it came to like these big action continuous stories, because when MJ finally sees the tattered in the cut open suit of Peter Parker as Spider-Man, and you get that realization that they lock eyes and she knows now that he's Peter, while also he's trying to save the day, and you just see that he's straining to save, but when he finally sees that she sees him for who he is and he doesn't kind of have to hide that he's Spider-Man anymore, it was such a perfect moment done in that film. But because you also had Doc Ock was done so well of bringing that to dramatic, but also you got a little bit of the campy, almost Evil Dead type of horror because of when he's getting operated on and stuff like that. But Doc Ock was one of the better villains done in comic books, because they took it, Alfred Molina is an incredible actor, and he took it very seriously, and it was just so really done. But that, like, we've both talked about the chills we got in Endgame of, like, the Mjolnir flying to Captain America and everything, getting chills with that. The Spider-Man 2 was that first comic book chills moment I got, because I knew the comics and I knew that MJ eventually finds out, but it was just such a well done timing of when MJ sees Peter as Spider-Man that is really well done in that. And so I do put the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy a little bit above the X-Men trilogy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that was one that really helped prove that comic book superhero movies could work, really, because it wasn't, if you think back to that time, if you were around, back when those were really popular, that was almost unheard of. Like, comic book properties were not popular films at all. It was still considered like a very niche, very nerdy thing to kind of be into, and it was kind of something that was untouched until you got around to like the success of like a Spider-Man trilogy, and when you got to do the X-Men, even, like, it was still considered a very niche thing. And I'd be remiss if we talked about comic books if we didn't talk about one of the sleeper hit trilogies that was ever made, one that nobody really saw coming until we got an absolutely incredible first movie out of it, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, we got three really good movies. The second one, some people would argue, is better than the first one. I think it's a little bit of a step down from the first one, but the third one is another really solid entry too. That's not a perfect movie by any means. You go back in our archives and see what we thought about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but it was one that definitely hit across all three films. And the first one was just, man, it took everybody by surprise with how popular it was, because you had the perfect mix of these heroes that not a lot of people were familiar with, but had an incredible soundtrack. And we talk all the time about how important music can be to a film's success. And I think without the incredible soundtrack that was laid with it, and the incredible work that James Gunn did creating this world that survived 3 films and did very well with all 3 of them. I think it's one that absolutely deserves to be on the list.
Yeah, fantastic mix of action, humor, and perfectly timed music in there. That you're doing a futuristic space trilogy here that's operating within the MCU, but kind of outside of it on its own thing. That it's in there, but it's outside of it, and you've got music from the 60s, 70s, 80s. That's the main soundtrack, which could be a really big issue because, you're in the 2000s here and those are classic songs now and that everyone's looking at. And it could have been a big miss, but everything just works so perfectly with the scenes and where they put it. And even had using outtakes and gags in the film, because I just still remember in that first film when he's holding up the container that holds one of the Infinity Stones and he drops it and he just stands up and he holds it back up to him. That was a gag. Chris accidentally dropped it and he just kept in the scene, and it just worked so well that he really became Star-Lord and became that character. And of course everyone loved the dark humor with Groot. Like he's stabbing people with his extended arm on the ship, and then he just looks at everybody and smiles like, hey, I did good. Like a little puppy, like, hey, I did good, right? But yeah, it works so well. There's another one I want to make sure we talk about here because I love it. It's not as revered as a lot of other trilogies, and here's the Bourne trilogy. I really loved Matt Damon in this role. Like seeing him as an action star, seeing him do the kind of stuff he did in there, and the shaky cam, handheld cam of it, the storytelling, the action. I think it was a really solid trilogy. Of course, they continued it by doing another one with Jeremy Renner, and then they brought Matt Damon back to do Bourne to kind of wrap that up in a way. But the first 3 were such a really good spy, espionage, action, such great like vehicle chase scenes and just hand-to-hand combat, and it was just done so really well. There's some of my favorite films. Like not a lot of people are as big on it. I know it didn't stick as close to the books as some people wanted to do, but I think what they gave us in those first 3, and I'm not hating on the next 2, I really enjoyed them as well, but there was something special to me about those first 3.
Yeah, and the first Bourne film was just groundbreaking at the time. Like it was such a cool, well done story, and it spawned some really classic films around it. Like those got popular for a reason. They made a ton of money. Like those films did really well commercially. They did it with a guy like Matt Damon, who nobody suspected would have been an action star, and kind of made him one for those films. And I want to use the Matt Damon connection to kind of tie to the last one I wanted to mention in this category, and that's the Ocean's trilogy. Ocean's 11, 12, and 13. Ocean's 11 is in my opinion, a brilliant film as well. It takes kind of this ensemble cast of huge name Hollywood actors and throws them all into a film, and something that you wouldn't think would work well, it works well. I mean, you've got George Clooney, you've got Brad Pitt, you've got Matt Damon, you've got a lot of big name actors.
Bernie Mac.
Yeah, like attached to this film. Rest in peace to the legend Bernie Mac. Like incredible cast for this film, and spawned off 2 successful sequels and kind of a reboot with the Ocean's 8 with the all-female version too. Like that original trilogy, in my opinion, were really solid movies, and some that don't always get talked about as like an incredible trilogy, but one that, the 2 spinoffs on it were really solid too. I think those were really well done films that worked together very well and were very commercially successful as well in their own right, and it worked more than I thought they would when you talk about throwing an ensemble, because sometimes when you get those ensemble films, you never know what kind of a mixed bag you're going to get, but those worked really well with the way those were shot and done. I had a blast watching all 3 of those.
I love the Ocean's films. You got Brad Pitt eating throughout and
So
having
good.
that be a gag, and you've got just so many huge names that appear throughout here. I like the Ocean's 8 spinoff that they did with the women. It wasn't as good as it was. There's such a chemistry between those guys that really works so well. They're potentially gearing up to do an Ocean's 14. Of course, we've lost several members of the team now, so it's going to be really interesting to how they do that. I do want to touch on one more before we move on to our next section, because we just got done reviewing the third in the trilogy. I'm putting the Knives Out trilogy into the excellent area here because I feel like all 3 were so much fun. They're so interesting. They're so different because we don't really have that many murder mystery shows or films or anything going on anymore. So it's kind of a niche type of films, but I think they did such an incredible job with, as Oceans did, of taking stacked cast and making no one ever really feel like they're overshadowing anybody else, that the story, the mystery, all that is the main star of these films, and that they're able to use these brilliant actors to make that story shine.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Like what we talked about in our review is like you don't have, it's one of those brilliant trilogies that doesn't have to be interconnected to work. And obviously we hope they continue making more of those films as we talked about, but individually on their own are all really, really good, really solid films that we both got a lot of enjoyment out of watching. And it's centered around a character that's telling several different stories that don't have to be interconnected, but they work. They work so well. And it's one that I would love to take kind of a winter day here soon and just watch all three of them together. Like you mentioned, just kind of just take a day and watch them all and see what I feel about it. But yeah, definitely worthy of an entry onto this. Definitely an A-tier trilogy, I would say, because all three films individually stand up really well, and they happen to be connected to the same character and actor. So I think it fits in this. I think it fits in this category really well.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Really enjoyed it. It's not over with yet, so it's one of those. Well, you consider the first three trilogy, even though they're not connected, even though we're potentially getting 4 and 5. But right now, it's a trilogy, and it belongs in there. But I want to move us on to ones that should have been perfect. We all know that there are films out there that they nail the first, they nail the second, but they just drop. Even like the Spider-Mans could be in there. The second one's the strongest. The first and third can be a little weaker, but we do have some trilogies that had a couple brilliant films, and then they just really fell off a cliff with the last one. And I'm going to leave it or turn it over to you to kind of kick this one off. What is one of your big ones that really should have been a top tier trilogy, but really that third one really killed it?
I think the immediate example I go to is comparing it to one that we consider to be the perfect trilogy, and that's The Hobbit. I would be remiss if I would say that, because The Hobbit is notorious for being a significant step down from what the brilliance of the original trilogies are, where you essentially take the shortest book and you stretch it out for 3 movies. Like, I think this film, what makes it a potentially perfect trilogy was it could have been an amazing single story. You could have made this incredible 3.5 hour, if you wanted to make it that long, film that could have taken all of the best elements from each of the 3 movies, because they're not terrible movies by any stretch. None of them are terrible films, but there's so much stretched out to kind of capitalize on how successful the Lord of the Rings trilogy was. To make this into 3 films was egregious in my opinion, but if you could have taken what worked in each of those 3 movies and combined it into one, you could have had a potential masterclass of a film that would have worked so incredibly well. But the fact that they chose to stretch it out for 3 movies is one that it just had so much potential to be a perfect movie that became a trilogy, and that's kind of cheating and bending the rules on this list a little bit, I think. But because of the fact that they told us the story over 3 films, that I really think it's a great example of it, because it's stretching out what could have been an incredible solo film, and it unfortunately became a trilogy. And fans feel about what they feel. I'll still go back and watch them occasionally, but nowhere near the level I would with the original Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah, and it's one that hurts because, and we'll discuss here in a little bit where we see where this falls on our list, is the Lord of the Rings trilogy that Peter Jackson did is incredible.
Right.
And they nailed every aspect. Yes, they don't have every character or every aspect of the book in there.
Which is impossible.
Unless it was 376 hours long, especially if you want to put in the other books and the lore and everything.
If they keep doing these extended cuts, they might get to 300 hours.
But yeah, The Hobbit was so disappointing in that fact that, it's a much smaller book than The Lord of the Rings. It's much more, some will call it a children's book. It's not exactly a children's book, but it's a different type of storytelling than the Lord of the Rings was. And at max 2 films, but you really could have condensed this into 1 film, because you added the love triangle between elves and dwarves in there, and there's just a lot of stretching and padding and stuff. And when those who are not as familiar with The Hobbit see the more silly nature of some of the stuff, especially like going in the barrels and down the river in the barrels and stuff, that it can take you out of it. But it was so disappointing as a trilogy because it didn't need to be a trilogy. Correct. And you had such a perfect trilogy done with the Lord of the Rings before that this felt like just a huge swing and a miss. That you can blame studio, you can put some blame on, Peter Jackson as well, but it didn't work. Like I enjoy them. I'll watch and go back. I haven't watched them with my oldest yet. We finished, the Lord of the Rings or actually no, we haven't watched Return of the King yet. So we haven't finished the trilogy yet.
Get on it, man.
So once we finish the trilogy here, which will probably happen over winter break when she's off of school, then we'll probably go into The Hobbit and I'll revisit them because it's been a few years since I revisited them. But that is a good example of just this really shouldn't have been a trilogy.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be in the discussion, but because they made it a trilogy, then it should have been more perfect because they nailed the Lord of the Rings so much. And it can show even a master crafter in Peter Jackson of what he did Lord of the Rings couldn't make The Hobbit work as a trilogy. And
that's the element that was most disappointing by it, because you had all of the same players basically at the creative helm of the Lord of the Rings trilogy trying to make this into 3 movies. And like I said, that's what sets it up so much for disappointment for me, because the potential was there. You had all the right people in the room, and it just goes to show how important it is to capture that magic when you get the opportunity to, because you have all the same players and they couldn't have that lightning strike twice like they did with the first one. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm going to lump together 2 of my biggest of what should have been perfect trilogies because they both have the same kind of issue.
Sure.
That is Alien and Terminator.
Sure. Brilliant.
Alien 1 is such a dark horror. You have that, it's all contained on a ship and you're getting the xenomorphs and seeing these alien creatures for the first time. And it's so incredibly dark and tense and everything else. And then you come in with James Cameron doing Aliens, where he brings more action into it, and it's hailed as one of the greatest sequels ever made. Absolutely. Incredibly well done. You get horror, you get more action, you get a star-studded cast of people in there, and then it's several years later you get Alien 3, and it was just such, compared to how near perfect the first 2 films were, the third one just dropped the ball so hard. You had weird alien creatures were done, the alien dog-like creature. You had just so much that went wrong with that third one that it really killed what should have been a perfect trilogy. Like, we're still getting alien stuff made, but they're still all chasing what they did in Alien 1 and 2. And the other one that I'm putting in with this is Terminator.
Sure.
Terminator 1, dark horror, really well done. And then Terminator 2, Judgment Day, again, one of the greatest sequels ever made. It upped the action. Special effects that still stand up really well with the liquid metal and everything. And it was just, both of those were so, they're different, kind of how Alien and Aliens were different. Terminator and Terminator 2 were pretty different because, first one, Arnold is out to kill. And in this one, he's out to protect. And then even farther down the line, we get Terminator 3. And it was just a real disappointment because it felt like lighter and it wasn't as much horror, but the writing and the action and the story and everything was just subpar. So you had both of these, Alien and Terminator 2, brilliant first and second films, and they just fell so hard on the third.
Yeah, I agree. And these are 2 incredible cases, and these are like the classic textbook cases of when people talk about, sequels and their placements among the originals. Like, these are 2 that are widely quoted as being, if not on par, better than the original films, which for the longest time was such a rare case that these 2 were kind of the standout examples where you get a bigger budget, but it doesn't sacrifice the quality of the movie, right? So a lot of times when people are like, oh, we're going to blow the budget out on this film, everybody's like, well, you automatically assume it's going to be bad because there's so much more going into it, and you worry about the quality taking a hit because they put so much more money into it. Like, you wonder if it's going to have that same impact and appeal as the original. But these are 2 incredible examples of that working in its favor, to where you get these 2 follow-ups to original and creative and incredible films, and they take it to the next level with the second one, and then they completely fall off a cliff with the third ones. Like, I couldn't agree more, because Aliens and Terminator 2 are classics, like, in every sense of the word. And then whether it be time. Time might have had something to do with the break that we've had for both of these, but yeah, when they both came up with the next follow up to that, it was just nowhere near on par with the first two, and that's unfortunate because, like you said, incredible films, and then you try to continue and expand on that world, and it just doesn't work in the same way, and it's unfortunate because, like you said, both two, had they just been a solo and a follow up film, incredible classics, legacy not tainted, like it's incredible films, and you unfortunately get the follow-ups that were just severe misses in that case. I couldn't agree more. Those are two incredible examples.
Yeah, you could say for both of them, the third films really tainted the franchise because they were so big of misses. And Terminator continued on trying to do other films to try to better it, and they all had their problems and issues. And Alien has continued on trying to do, more outside of this, while Romulus was a solid enough kind of reboot, but not a reboot, because it went back to what made Alien work, but it also didn't do enough of its own stuff to make it unique and original, which made us really curious and excited to see what they do with the follow-up to Romulus, to see if, all right, are we going to get that Aliens type of movie to Romulus, because it feels like, all right, you were almost there to making a spectacular Alien film. Can you nail it with the second one? And even James Cameron is potentially coming back to do another Terminator film here. And Ridley Scott has kind of talked like he's done with Alien. He did Prometheus and he did his prequels, but nothing has really hit in either of these franchises as the first two films did. Like they're legacies that nothing has been able to live up to.
Yeah, I mean, you do have the TV series Alien Earth that we've talked about, that we've gone and done the review on. Go back in our archives, obviously, and check that out. But yeah, definitely some that have fallen off creatively, like as time has gone on for some of these, and some of these not so much the case. Like there's potential to always come back and get better, and we'll see what the follow up to Romulus does. Like you said, we're hopeful about it, but the jury's still out. We'll see what we get from that. I want to move us though into one of my personal favorite film franchises of all time, and I know it's one of yours too, and that's Ninja Turtles. Like, if we didn't talk about Ninja Turtles, obviously the first one, absolutely incredible film. We recently just went back and watched the original film in theaters. That was a ton of fun. And then, The Secret of the Ooze is another amazing one as well. Just an incredible follow-up to that. That was more on the lighter-hearted kind of cartoon, led into more of the cartoony nature of the Turtles in the second one. And then you have the unfortunate Turtles in Time that became like a direct-to-video kind of fodder, not the same impact as those. But, man, those first two Turtle films are just so incredibly fun, and ones that I know you and I both will routinely go back and watch, as time continues to move forward. Like, we keep finding ourselves coming back to these films. But, man, what an incredible first two films. And you want to talk about falling hard off a cliff with the third one? This is kind of a really, really good example of that as well, because unfortunately that third one did get that direct to video, which was like the death knell of a franchise back in the day. Like, that would be like your first two being mega hits in the theaters, and you release your third one on a random streaming service just because you wanted to put it out. Like, that's kind of the equivalent of that today.
Yeah, just the 4K cut of seeing Turtles back in theaters and be able to take my kids and watch that with them was incredible. And we've already said they're putting out Secret of the Ooze early in 2026. And we're there. As soon as tickets are on sale, absolutely, I'm buying, and we're going to. Like, we're not missing seeing Secret of the Ooze, because, the first one was so dark and gritty, matching more of the comic book, because, this is taking place right after they had started the animated series, which was more kid-friendly and lighthearted. And the first one was, and is still close to being, I think it did get surpassed, but it was for 20-something years the highest grossing independent film of all time. And it was done so well. It was so dark and gritty. And then you bring in Secret of the Ooze because they wanted to be able to make more merchandise and stuff, and they made it more silly and funny. You got Vanilla Ice doing the ninja rap, and you got Tokar and Razor brought in, and you got a bit sillier, but it's still just so much fun, even though you could take or leave Super Shredder, because it was such... That's the biggest knock I can give on Secret of the Ooze, is that you give us this monstrous Super Shredder, but all he does is knock over a dock and die. Like, you could have done a whole lot more with the Super Shredder, but yeah, it was so beloved and fun. And then, Turtles in Time, like, all right, we've done two films about Shredder, and about kind of grounded in the real world. Let's make the third film be about time travel, and let's go back into feudal Japan and do all that stuff. But I think the biggest issue for me with the third film, and it's still kind of a guilty pleasure that I'll go back and watch every now and then, it doesn't get watched as much as the other two. They didn't use the Jim Henson company anymore for the animatronics. They went with another company, and they were just weird. The weird. Turtles look strange and weird, the facial expressions, but they added more they try to add more detail into the suits of like more spots and other things, but they just look so funky and weird. And
it's a stark.
It was a stark contrast. Like the Jim Henson suits for the first two were incredible. Some of the best animatronics and suits that you have done, even though it is funny to go back and see the outtakes of like in the first one, you can see the actor's face in the mouth of Leonardo Donatello. And you can see some mistakes and issues, and the syncing of the lips are not as good. But yeah, those suits in the third one was the biggest travesty to me. Is just how terrible. Bad those suits were.
Yeah, and that's a really hard follow for that. We can move into some of our other picks, kind of as like a quick hitter before we move into other categories. I know we'd mentioned we wanted to talk about the Jurassic Park trilogy in particular and how incredible the original Jurassic Park film is one of the greatest films ever made. I don't care who would agree or disagree on that one. Mm-hmm. Honestly, the second one was kind of okay. The Lost World was all right. The third one definitely not as good. And then you can kind of group the Jurassic World trilogy in the same way, where the potential was there, the desire was there, but definitely didn't hit where it needed to hit. I think I would agree with having it on this list.
Oh yeah, Jurassic Park 1, and even Jurassic Park 1 is vastly superior to anything they did with Jurassic World. But the first Jurassic World was a lot of fun. Like, you brought it back in a fun and interesting way. Like, they didn't learn their lesson, and they opened up a new park, and they think they've done everything right, and things go haywire. But yeah, that second and third, when you get into human cloning and you get into the deeper story they tried to tell, they kind of lost you a bit in that. And we technically have a fourth film that's kind of a reboot, but it's still in the Jurassic World type of family that tried to kind of take things back. But it was really strange. But yeah, Jurassic Park is so... And I know I finished reading the Jurassic Park again, and it's vastly different. But looking at just the film, Jurassic Park 1 was so incredible. Sure. And yeah, 2 was just so to me. Like, I love the character of Ian Malcolm and stuff, but making a whole film with him as a central character and about his daughter and going back to the island, have this going on, and then bringing it to the real world, but then really quickly taking it out of it. Like, there was a lot of issues and mistakes. I haven't read that book to see how vastly different it was. But yeah, the third one just kind of like felt like we almost don't know what we want to do, because you get a kid and it's stepfather who were paragliding and end up crash landing on the island, and they have to, Dr. Alan Grant gets tricked to going back to the island, and there's just so many problems with that it could have been a perfect trilogy. Like, even with the second one, like, this is different than the others where the first one is a superior one. The second one took a little bit of a dip, but you could have brought it back up if you really would have nailed that third film, but they just really dropped the ball on that with Jurassic Park. And yeah, Jurassic World, even though I had fun with all of them and my oldest daughter loves them, it did peak at 1 and just kind of slowly went downhill with the other two. The third one being the weaker of the three.
Easily the weakest of the three. I definitely cannot add anything additional to that, what you said. I'd be remiss if I didn't include one of my personal favorite comedies of all time, and it happens to encompass 2 films at least, and that's the Major League trilogy. Like Major League 1 and 2, some of the most quotable films of all time, in my opinion.
Marbles.
Exactly. It's
the original
so
6-7.
Yeah, the original 6-7, exactly right. Send all your hate comments to Brad Covey at we'llbringthepopcorn.com.
Please, kids, stop saying 6-7. I'm tired of hearing it in my household.
But the first 2 films, incredibly iconic. The third one is funny, but it's not like, it doesn't have the same charm as the first 2. The first 2 are absolutely iconic films, and you could have made a more modern, updated version of that if you wanted to. And it definitely hit, because you go to a minor league team instead of a major league team, and there's a fun story in there. It's just nowhere near as quality as the first 2. It's got its funny moments, but the first 2 were all-time classic comedies, and the third one was definitely a sharp step down, and probably could have been left alone at 2 films and would have been a perfect duo of films. But the fact that you threw the third one at us too was just kind of like, man, like you could have left well enough alone here. It was fun. I'll still go back and occasionally watch the third one, but the first two, once every year when baseball rolls around and baseball starts up again, I watch those films and I just crack up every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Every baseball season, right before the season's about to kick off, I watch Major League 1 and 2. They're incredible. The second one is better than the first one to me, but both of them are really fantastic. They're very close to each other, but there's just something about Bobby Uecker being the announcer and just
perfect casting.
Everybody fitting their role so well, and it's still to this day. Charlie Sheen is said from a lot of MLB pitchers to have had like the best form and the best look as a film pitcher and stuff. Like he was up there. They said he could hit 70, 80 miles an hour when he was really hauling back and throwing it. So even though it's a over-the-top comedy film, out of all of the baseball films we had, they still consider him to have one of the best forms as a pitcher in it. And it just, it has so many quotable parts to it. It just has so memorable. And the third one, I honestly couldn't tell you the last time I watched Back to the Minors. Like it to me doesn't even come close to the first two. It was okay. But the first two are like comedy classics to me. They're just a love for baseball, even though I watch like Field of Dreams and others like that. Like I have to watch Major League because they were just so much fun.
Yeah, and they're timeless classics. I would be remiss, and I want to make this the last one before we move on to our next category, but I kind of thought of this one in reverse order, where it started off incredibly weak, but man, you want to talk about nailing the ending of the trilogy, and that's the Wolverine trilogy. So if you think of the Wolverine trilogy, we talked about X-Men, but the actual 3 Wolverine-focused and centric movies where you have X-Men Origins Wolverine, not the best film. You get that god-awful version of Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool before he became the iconic version of Deadpool that we all know and love. The Wolverine... okay film. Like I think it could have been done a little better. It could have been, because when they do the whole some of the scenery they do in Japan is absolutely beautiful. Some of the cinematography and that's really good. The story is a little weaker, but when you talk about one of the best superhero films ever made, I would put Logan up there with just about anything, especially the black and white cut version of it, because the regular in color version is an incredible movie as well. But there's something absolutely beautiful and poetic with the black and white version of Logan, and just the incredible send off for one of the most iconic characters of all time. Of course, that's been undone now with the updated stuff in the MCU and Wolverine and Deadpool and Wolverine and all that, and whatever future involvement he's going to have until he's 90 in the MCU now. But just as a trilogy of standalone films, Logan was the perfect landing to a character's 3-film story arc that I've ever seen. It's such an incredible movie. That movie was a literal gut punch to me by the end of that film, and it's just one of the best, in my opinion, top 3 or 4 superhero movies of all time. I put Logan in there, and I will stand by that until something changes my mind.
Yeah, this is one where it, as you said, it's reverse order. Like the first one is terrible. Let's just like they went so over the top. You got the terrible Deadpool in there. You've got just so much went wrong with that. You've got Taylor Kish showed up as Gambit and then was never seen again, and you only gotten one. It was really rough. The Wolverine I enjoy. Yeah. It could have been so much better. They tried to do a much more dark and dramatic storyline, and then they went so over the top with the gigantic silver samurai and everything to end that they could have really made that be a really spectacular film. Agreed. They just missed the mark. But yeah, Logan was incredible. Like as you said, Logan Noir is a fantastic way to watch it, but I still feel like Hugh Jackman and especially Patrick Stewart got robbed of awards and nominations and stuff like that, because as someone who's dealt with 2 grandmothers who had Alzheimer's and seeing how that disease is, and you're trying to play a super psychic guy who has Alzheimer's and is struggling, and dementia, Alzheimer's, and is struggling with that, I think Patrick Stewart should have been nominated and won awards for his performance in Logan. And Hugh Jackman should have got some stuff too, because that was such a gut punch of a dark, gritty, serious, emotional film that was just, it's so crazy the stark contrast between all three of
Yeah.
those. Like it was like, well, we really failed with the first one. Let's try to do something a little bit more serious, but we really don't know how to stick the landing. And then it's like, all right, let's give James Mangold control of Logan and let him do his thing. And he just absolutely nailed it. But yeah, Logan was incredible. I do have one more I want to throw in here because it is one of the biggest film franchises that really had issues. Like I can enjoy the trilogy, but it had a lot of issues, and that's The Matrix.
Sure.
The Matrix was an incredible pop culture sensation. It started the bullet time filming style. It skyrocketed Keanu Reeves back into his career to who knows without The Matrix if John Wick or any of these other films that he's been able to do would have happened, because at that time his career was at a real lull. He wasn't doing a lot of stuff. He had done a lot of romantic comedies and other stuff like that had done okay, but The Matrix was just this pop culture phenomenon. You had the wire fu, you had the special effects, and the intriguing out there sci-fi story that we really hadn't had. But the next two, they dropped the ball to me a lot. Like they went way too much into CGI, losing that wire fu feeling that everyone loved from the first one of seeing them run up walls and doing the crazy flips. And I think what really broke a lot of people in the second one was that Neo versus Agent Smith fight, where you have, and again, that's really hard to have that many copies of somebody and not use CG, but it was so jarring that you have Keanu there fighting with the staff or the metal pole and stuff that he's using, and then the very next scene it's very clearly CG of him with all the CG, and it was just the marriage of CG to live action failed big time in that. But it was also the story kind of felt like it got a little bit away from him in the second and third one. It almost feels like if they would have just left it at one, it would have been one of the best sci-fi movies of all time. Yeah. A legend in that. And I do think the second and third Earth, there's some good moments in both of those, but there's some just really odd story issues. There's also some really odd CGI and visual issues. And then, of course, they did a fourth film, which was mostly hated by almost everybody many years later. It just felt really odd and strange. And now we're looking at a semi kind of reboot happening, but I feel like The Matrix was one that was right on the cusp of, it made a ton of money. Let's not get that wrong, that the Matrix trilogy killed at the box office. But story and immersion and everything else for those other two, it really dropped the ball to a fantastic film we got in the first.
Yeah, I have absolutely nothing to add to that. I could not agree more with everything you said there. The original Matrix is one of the most innovative science fiction films to come out at its time. Like there was nothing like it that we had ever seen in a film like that when it came out. It was groundbreaking. It was incredible. It was kind of redefining an entire genre and a new way of making film that had nothing we had seen come before. And I think people forget as time has gone on just how incredibly crucial that film was to the action genre, the science fiction genre, the CGI genre, really.
The blockbuster films.
That was just such an incredible experience that never was able to really recapture the exact same magic in the follow-ups, but still, and that's another one that I think was so important with the music and the soundtrack to it, also helping play an incredible role, because that original Matrix soundtrack was phenomenal. The other two that came across behind it were both really good too, but that's just another perfect pairing of that dark, heavier, brooding music that kind of goes along with it, that just really helped amplify an incredible story. And it's something that I know creatively they keep trying to chase that magic and haven't exactly followed up on it really well. But that first film is just an all-time classic, and one that I see why they kept going to that well. But man, as a standalone, that could have been just a perfect standalone film, like it really could have been. But alas, it's on our trilogy list for a reason.
Yeah, and how many hundreds of films after that first Matrix came out tried to mimic it, tried to recreate it, but also use the bullet time. Like you have so many directors who still kind of use that slow-mo that they started and perfected. Zack Snyder's a big one that became a
staple of his
a
films.
staple of his films is kind of what started with the Matrix, and he's changed and done it in different ways, but it's that still type. I still remember the Scary Movie franchise making fun of it with their next one after after the Matrix came out, but it was one of the bigger disappointment ones because that first one was so stellar, and the next two, like, I can enjoy them, but they have so many problems and issues that they kind of let it. It's almost a perfect examples of letting something get out of hand because you went too heavy with CGI and you tried to go really crazy with the story because it's got those religious religious parts to it, and you have just so much to try to do, and it didn't fully stick the landing, and then you kind of undid so much stuff by doing a fourth one there, and it just, I had to include it because it is one of the biggest film trilogies of all time, box office wise and culturally, but it really did, it should have been perfect, but it just missed the mark with those other two lagging behind.
I would agree with that. It's really hard to add anything to that because I think we really covered everything that we wanted to say with that, because it's I just really wish at the end of the day they just left it as a solo movie, but it makes its way onto our list as a trilogy, and we kind of got to judge it based on the totality, not just the brilliance of the first one. But one last category before we get to our perfect trilogy, because it's a one of one, and we know what we're building up to. But these are probably as close to perfect A+ tier trilogies, I think, if you keep them in 3 movies. Now, a couple of these on this list are going to be a little controversial because there are additional films that are in the franchise, so it's kind of cheating a little bit with it. But these are what we consider to be near perfect trilogies, right? So I would be remiss. I want to put my personal favorite. Probably my second personal favorite film trilogy of all time, and it's the Dark Knight trilogy. Like, you want to talk about Batman Begins was such a really, really good and underrated, in my opinion, kickoff to this trilogy. Like, I don't think Batman Begins gets as much love as it should for being this introduction to the Christopher Nolan trilogy of Batman films. Like, an incredible story of, Batman becoming the Dark Knight himself, becoming, with the League of Shadows, with Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, like his whole story kind of going away and learning how to become this incredible hand-to-hand fighter and learning, kind of embracing who he is as Batman before obviously leading into one of my personal top 2 or 3 favorite films of all time, and it's The Dark Knight. If you've never seen The Dark Knight, you might be one of 2 people left on the planet that have never seen it, but it's, in my opinion, my personal favorite comic book movie, if you want to call it that, of all time. Number 1 on my list. It's an absolutely incredible movie. Obviously, the incredible performance by Heath Ledger as the Joker really carries so much weight in that and really made it, and it went from being a potential already really good film to an absolute all-time classic, iconic film. One of the best performances you'll ever see in any film of any genre. The way he just completely loses himself in the madness of that character is just an incredible movie, and it made billions of dollars at the box office for a reason. And then you have the follow-up, the third one, which is The Dark Knight Rises, which, could be considered the weakest of the 3 potentially, but still a really, really good third movie. You have, of course, the goofy, everybody has a Bane imitation of Tom Hardy as Bane, like, talking about it. You do a really funny one that makes me laugh every time you do it, but still a really solid third film and a really incredible cast in that one too. You have Anne Hathaway as Catwoman, who does a really incredible job in this film too. You have Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it, like a really solid ending that overall has a few things you could nitpick about, but almost a perfect trilogy really does, and it's carried so heavily by just one of the best, in my opinion, the best sequel of all time in The Dark Knight.
And it's one that no one expected to see someone like Christopher Nolan do in a comic book movie, and he is one of the greatest directors that we have. He is our generation's Spielberg and Hitchcock and all that. Like, he is that incredible with what he did. I can't wait for the Odyssey to see what he does with that storyline, because I am kind of a history buff with stories, and I love the old stories like the Odyssey and that kind of stuff that tells different tales of that time period and everything. But you just didn't expect Christopher Nolan to be doing this, and there are some problems. Like, people have issues with Christian Bale's Batman voice. When anytime I try to imitate it, I turn into the college humor Batman.
The version of it, yeah.
But there are issues. I get what he's trying to do, because if you look into a lot of these comic book films, the masked and unmasked version of the voices
identical.
are almost identical. So he was trying to give something that, well, it's so ridiculous you wouldn't be able to tell that's actually Bruce Wayne because of how he talks as Batman. But it is. But yeah, The Dark Knight is an incredible film, so well directed and everything. But yeah, just Heath Ledger steals the show completely. I will defend to the end of time that his performance as a Joker is one of the greatest performances of all time, not just for a comic book film, of all time. The way he lost himself in that character, the slow ticks and changes that you can see in the character throughout, the mental instability that you can see shift and change to the point. There's some ridiculousness to it, how, Harvey Dent's laying in the hospital bed and he has burned half of his face, so he's going to be a little out of it, but he can't clearly see that's the Joker until he brings the mask down. He's still got the makeup caked on his face and saying the hi and stuff, and then he gets mad. That was a little ridiculous, but just one of the greatest performances of all time that ended up costing him his life because of issues with sleeping afterwards with that. But it's one of the greatest performances of all time outside of a comic book film. That is one of the most incredible performances. I'm glad he got the Oscar after his passing for it, because there's just no way that could have been given to anybody else. There's some great performances that year, but nothing matched what he did. And I will say, Rises did drop the ball a little bit for the ending, but it is so close. Tom Hardy was a great Bane. You can make fun of the voice and stuff as much. I did feel like it just didn't give us that cohesive, good ending to it, because it kind of has that time jump and that jump at the end, and Bane not feeling physically he's a good opponent, but you weren't really feeling the villain part of him, of being like this grandiose final villain along with Talia al Ghul and everything. That it just didn't feel like it had, compared to what you had with The Dark Knight. It just couldn't live up to that villain and what they had to really end that trilogy on a high note. It is still a fantastic trilogy. It's that one that just, that third film just makes it just so short of being perfect.
That's why we call it a near miss, right? It's almost there. It's closer than anything we've gotten so far that we've talked about as far as nailing all three films. It's as close as we call it A+ for a reason. Still, go back and watch all three films regularly with no problem, but not completely perfect, but pretty close. They get pretty close to it. Silly voices aside.
I've got to toss out there probably the biggest trilogy of all time, potentially, when you come from a cultural aspect and box office and just what it meant for film and everything else, is the original Star Wars trilogy. Of course, it started out as one film, as Star Wars. Then it got changed to A New Hope, and then we got the other three. The impact that Star Wars has had on pop culture, on film, on box office, on sci-fi, on everything. It's... even trying to talk about it feels like you're underestimating the impact that this has had on a global scale, from all the novels and games and films and TV shows and everything in the Star Wars universe has gone out, that has created such a cult following and everything, that really started with New Hope, which was an incredible, unique film that we hadn't seen up to that point when it first came out. And then again, we talk about the pinnacle of sequels, and Empire Strikes Back being hailed as probably the greatest sequel of all time, ahead of everything. And as much as I do enjoy Return of the Jedi, it just had such a different feeling and everything else. You're bringing in the Ewoks, and you're doing, everything that they try to do with that one. And of course, the special editions adding in Anakin in a different way, and, George Lucas going back and messing with it and doing the special editions and us not getting. But if you're talking about the original 3 theatrical releases of these films, they're incredible, and it's one of the biggest cultural phenomenons of all time when you're talking about these films, even though Return of the Jedi does have probably the most issues out of any of them, and it does bring it down. But the significance of the first two and what Star Wars has meant, it has to be up there as being one of the most near perfect trilogies of all time because of just everything that it accomplished and did in an incredible way. And yeah, Return of the Jedi is just, it's hailed as most everyone's least favorite of all, but it still encapsulated this great trilogy that had twists and turns and just such amazing stuff that it spawned so many TV shows, prequels, sequels, everything else, and you can have your debates about the prequels and the sequels and everything, but the original three were just phenomenal.
Yeah, and the impact that they had on culture and society, like you said, 4 decades later, we're still talking about it as having cultural relevance, which is almost impossible this length of time later. Like the impact cannot be understated. Like it's huge. It showed that science fiction can be mainstream. Like it's one of the few films that, like, the film series that show that what can be possible not only through film but its impact that it can have on people. Like it's you would be remiss to not talk about the importance of that trilogy. Like you said, they're not perfect films. Empire Strikes Back is an incredible movie. It's one of the best, like you said, one of the top 3, 4, 5 sequels of all time. It definitely is one. And my next one that I'm going to talk about is right up there as well. But yeah, you'd be remiss to not talk about how important it is. I mean, to this later, it's a multi-billion dollar franchise for a reason. Like, there's a reason, like, when the sequels came out, that they were sold out midnight screen. The midnight screening really became popularized because of Star Wars. Like, the demand was so high for more of the franchise that they started offering those midnight screenings and all these other things that became cultural events. And, you know, it really helped push, you know, the way people went to the theater even forward into the 21st century, where now we're getting movies that, instead of having the traditional Friday release, and they're not having the midnight Thursday night Friday releases, they're releasing films even earlier now. Like, you're getting, like, we go to movies all the time on Thursday nights now, like that. And a lot of that wouldn't have happened had Star Wars not had the positive impact that it did. Look what happened when Phantom Menace came out. It broke box office records like opening weekend. Guess what happens when you get the new sequel versions? Remember how big the first movie of the sequels were, and how, like, that's probably the most commercially successful of all of them. Like, I think it's still a top 5 movie grossing all time.
Yep.
Like, it's had that long lasting of an impact, and you can't understate that. It's so important to the history of cinema that I agree it deserves a place on this.
And it had one of the most talked about twists of all time. Like, if you want to talk about movies having a twist that you didn't see coming, one of the first one that pops in your head is Darth Vader being Luke Skywalker's father. Like, that is of the big, sorry, spoilers.
Just kidding.
No. But it's one of the talked about. If you're trying to talk about the best twist in movies that you didn't expect, that is one of the biggest ones that were ever talked about. Because especially when it came out and you didn't have social media, and you had to have had to have everything word of mouth, and you had to have people kind of being secretive about, okay, we can't really talk about this movie because it's going to spoil this huge twist, and that not, like, everybody knew when they were filming it what was going to be said. Like, it was just so many different layers and aspects of Star Wars. You cannot have a trilogy list without Star Wars being near the top.
Absolutely, and it's very deserving of its place on the list. I want to move us into talking about, you want to talk about near perfect, and this could also have, you can make an argument, have been included in our last list, and in my opinion, the single greatest sequel of all time, and I will stand on business on this, and that's the Godfather trilogy. The Godfather, original Godfather, all-time classic film. The Godfather Part 2, in my opinion, better than Godfather Part 1. You can make that argument. I will fight anybody that thinks otherwise. Godfather Part 2, incredibly brilliant film. You want to take those first 2 films, and you could put them in anybody's top 10 list of all-time films, and nobody would really argue with you. Like,
they have to be there.
It was peak Martin Scorsese at his absolute maximum power right there. Just incredible films, the pinnacle of filmmaking. It was so influential for so many different types of films and genres, and what was possible on film, and just how to make an incredibly good film. The third film, garbage. Not a good film at all. But the first 2 are so S-tier movies that you have to include it in an A+ list, no matter how bad the third film was. First 2, pinnacle of cinematography, pinnacle of filmmaking, almost perfect. Had the third film held up to the first 2, it would be a hot debate with the other, in my opinion, the other trilogy that we're going to talk about when we talk about our perfect one, right up there with it, and you would have a hard time convincing me otherwise. The first two, incredible pinnacle of filmmaking, just phenomenal films.
I don't know if I have much else to add to that. You're absolutely correct. Godfather Part 2 was so incredible and much better than the first Godfather, which was an incredible film as well. But yeah, that third one is where it just really fell off a cliff. Like, it just could not nail that ending, and it wasn't good. But you said the strength of the first two still makes it be one of the best trilogies of all time. Even if, like, you're giving the first two a 10, you're giving the last one like a 7, those two are still so good that you have to have it in that list because they're such an incredible trilogy.
Correct.
And yeah, you can't really argue with The Godfather Part 1 or 2 being on anybody's favorite film list, and you have to have that trilogy up there as well, even as we've said, the third one being so bad.
It drug the third one along.
The first two drug that third one along. Just forget about that guy, but we're so good that you can forgive us for it.
If you were to talk about just a 2-film story, like if the third one had never been made, you could make the argument that The Godfather is the greatest story of all time in film. You could. The first two are that good. Incredible performances, Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, just phenomenal. You talk about so many names come out of that cast, and then you give us the third one. The third one was so weak, but the first two, pinnacle of filmmaking. I would stand that up against any 1-2 punch of a film of all time, and it would hold its weight with anyone.
Yeah, another franchise that has a weaker film in it that the other two really hold up. That weaker one is Indiana Jones. Like, the first and the third are so incredible. They're so well done.
So we cheat a little.
Action, adventure, comedy, and stuff in it. And yeah, we're going to cheat a little bit because there was a fourth that I can't. Was there a fourth?
Something about a skull. I don't know.
But, the first one was so incredible and gave us some of the most memorable action scenes, and along with Blade Runner and Star Wars and everything else, skyrocketed Harrison Ford to being a pinnacle of the action star and everything else. But Temple of Doom was that weird one that George Lucas was going through a divorce and having a hard time when he wrote that, and they were all religious-based films, but you left the Nazis behind for this cult and the mountains and the monkey brains and all that stuff. It was even though it gave us Short Round and it gave us, some really... There's some fun stuff in it. It was so strange and such a departure that when they came back to the third one, that almost felt like it ignored the second one and went back to what they were doing with the first one, and bringing Sean Connery in as his dad and everything else. Those two are so good that it makes you forget just how weak Temple of Doom is, but you can also be like, all right, we're going to forget there was a fourth. And the fifth one was okay.
Sure.
But for the most part, you're going to look at this as a trilogy because it took so long for them to decide to revisit and go back to. And that's where we're cheating a little bit because Crystal Skull was bad. Fifth one was okay. Like, I enjoyed it for the most part, but it's
that it's bad too.
You could have taken fourth and fifth one and never done them, and I would have been happy just to have these three because the first and the third are so incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark, all-time classic film as well. Like, it's so good. In my opinion, one of the more underrated films, honestly, because of just how good that movie is. I got to admit, the one I have the most fun watching is The Last Crusade, and I don't know why. The whole, you have chosen wisely, just the whole absurdness of the Holy Grail and the adventure they go on in that story is just so over the top but fun. In my opinion, I get the most enjoyment watching that.
Learning that Indiana was
the name of the dog
after
and all that stuff. And just Sean Connery, just amazing performance from Sean Connery is Indiana Jones.
Especially with his thick accent still there. It doesn't fully make sense that he's Indiana's dad, but you really don't care.
Don't care at that point. It is so fun and so good. But yeah, I mean, first and the third, absolutely fantastic movies. The second one is definitely a left turn. It's like, oh, we needed you to keep going straight, but you veered off to the left, and that road will eventually come back to the straight road you should have been on the entire time. But it definitely drug it down a little bit because it is a weird movie. It is such a weird,
dark and weird,
like Indiana Jones film. But they course corrected, and they got it right on the third one. It's just such a fun time. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Back to the Future trilogy as well, which
incredible,
an absolutely incredible 1-2 punch of the first two films. The third film is probably the weakest, but it's still a fun movie.
Still have a ton of fun.
It's still a really fun movie. The first two, awesome. Back to the Future one, I keep saying it, but it's true. Like, these are iconic films. One of the best films ever made. The original Back to the Future was awesome. The second one was a ton of fun too. The third one, like you said, a little bit weaker, but still a fun film overall. Almost perfect trilogy of films, but man, that first one, just what an insane, incredible classic film.
It's one of those trilogies on here, past all the others, that everyone says, do not remake, do not redo, do not touch this trilogy ever again. You are not going to make a fourth. You are not going to reboot it.
Correct.
And that's not just Robert Zemeckis and Spielberg and everyone else who had hands in this. It's fans, it's critics, it's everybody in film saying,
don't touch it.
You do not touch the Back to the Future trilogy. Like, it's perfect as it is. The third one's weaker, but I still have a lot of fun going back to the Old West and kind of redoing things in the same way that they had done at that point. Like, it felt like maybe if you left it at 2, there would have been 2 of the most perfect films that you had done.
Make the argument.
I don't think 3 is bad, but it is weaker.
Sure.
But it's still just so much fun. Like, it's such a unique film that there's nothing else like it. Like, originally the time travel was going to be in like a refrigerator or something else, and then they got the DeLorean, and of course between Michael J. Fox, coming in late after the already been filming to recast that role and becoming the pinnacle of his career, being Back to the Future. I mean, he's had a ton of big roles, but nothing bigger than Back to the Future is Marty McFly. And it was also because of the time and special effects. With Star Wars and everything else, you started seeing bigger special effects movies, but the way they were able to pair the future with the past and mix those scenes, especially I give credit to the second one because of how they took footage and things they did in that first film and revisited from different angles and did more stuff with it. It was such an inventive, ahead of its time type of films, but they're just feel good, fun, action, sci-fi, adventure, comedy. Just, it nailed everything so well. Perfectly cast, even though they did recast the craziness with the second one with just having so much, but it was just so much fun, so well done. It is incredible. And one more I want to touch on here is because a lot of people may not give animated films their due justice when it comes to storytelling and everything else, but Toy Story 1 through 3 is a near perfect trilogy of hitting you with emotion and a great story of growing up and hitting you in the feels with everything we know. They did Toy Story 4, Toy Story 5 is about to come out, so they're still kind of stretching it. But if you looked at Toy Story 1 through 3 as its own trilogy, which it really is, it's fantastic. It's such good for kids, good for adults, such a well done, touching, emotional story. The third one being kind of the weaker out of it, but the first two were incredible. The third is still very good film. It's probably the best animated trilogy that you could argue about of all time, because it is just that masterfully told, with the storytelling, with the perfect voice cast behind everybody, how they handled everything with those first 3 Toy Story films. It's just absolutely incredible. Even hearing, I think Quentin Tarantino has kind of said the same thing, that Toy Story 3, the first 3 Toy Stories, are some of his favorite films of all time. It's like they were just so brilliantly done. That was unique and really skyrocketed Pixar to being what they are, but they had cultural significance as well. It's just those 3 incredible animated films.
Yeah, I have absolutely next to nothing to add to that. They're the best arc of storytelling for animated films I've ever seen. I'm a grown man with no kids, and I get emotional watching that. You can really resonate with the story, growing up and losing a part of your childhood, and just moving on from things that you were, your toys that you had as a kid. Who couldn't resonate with that? And it's done with just incredible humor and heart, and it's just an almost completely perfect trilogy of films. It is cheating because they did go on and make the 4th one. And the 4th one is really good too. I like the 4th one. The 4th one was fun. Gets a little silly with the inclusion of Forky or whatever. They try to shoehorn an extra character in there, or Sporky. But like the fifth one, we'll see what they get out of it too. But man, those first three, I agree. Like if they were just a standalone trilogy, I have a hard time calling it a trilogy now just because of that. But yeah, like you said, we're cheating. We're cheating a little bit. But yeah, you have to include it on there. I can't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, and finally getting around to what we consider our perfect, our number one, the greatest trilogy of all time. You've heard us talk about it several times, all the time, many times.
It's Airbud.
It's Airbud, yeah. Airbud is just incredible. That dog deserves every award possible ever.
He's the goodest boy.
Just gets me emotional talking about
it. Does every time. Such a good boy.
But you want to take it away? What is our number one perfect trilogy of all time?
Guys, it's the Lord of the Rings. It can't be anything other than that. You want to talk about a three set of films that, as the story progresses, it just gets better and better and better. In my opinion, it is the rare franchise that gets better as it goes, and it peaks in the final film. Like I've said multiple times on here, The Return of the King is my favorite movie of all time. I think it is an absolutely perfect movie from start to finish, and in context of sticking the landing in a storytelling way. Like, it's an incredible movie. The Two Towers is an incredible sequel that is on par with the third film as well. It's a lot of people's favorite films. Like, it has the greatest cinematic battle scene of all time, in my opinion, the Battle of Helm's Deep. Like, it's a perfectly shot, casted, acted, performed storytelling film. It checks every box of what you want in a good film, but it extends it over three films. Like you get this entire arc that starts with as something simple as at the end of the day, it's an evil ring that you have to throw into a volcano to destroy before it consumes the entire world. Like that is the bare basic minimalist Cliff Notes, get you a D- on your report of the story, but they do such an incredible job of world building and character introduction and character progression. It gets better and better and better as it goes on, and it's so impossible for a film franchise to do. You can make an incredible individual film. You can make an incredible two-story arc, as we've talked about with several other films on the list. It is so hard to do that and then follow it up with such a creative peak on your third film that closes the story in such an incredible way and brings everything full circle and hits that climax of a story where you need to hit it to. And still to my day, until the end of my days, and I'm going to look straight in the camera when I say this, I ugly cry at the end of this third film every time I watch it. When Aragorn says to those hobbits, "You kneel to no one," tears, and I'm welling up thinking about it. That's how emotional I get. But it's such a perfect trilogy.
Yeah, of course, those who are big into fantasy and all that stuff are going to get more out of it. And if you're not as big into fantasy, I still think there's so much that you can get out of this because, yeah, Tolkien created Middle Earth of massive, expansive story across The Hobbit, across The Lord of the Rings, which you can either look at it as one book, which it was, split into three by the publisher and everything else, but you also have all the other stories and the unfinished stories that he wrote about Middle-earth. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's left out from the books and stuff in here, but you got to remember, these movies, without the extended editions, are 3 hours plus long. So you're looking at a 9 to 10 hour story between these three films. You get the extended edition taking us to 12 to 13 hours of content in there, and they still didn't tell everything. That you have to realize that they just couldn't show and have everything. But yeah, just absolute perfection. No actor out of place. Everybody fit their character and their role so well. I mean, it's just, you cannot think of anybody else as Frodo, as Samwise, as Gandalf, as Aragorn, which I will bring up. There's potential rumblings that they might be recasting Aragorn for the Hunt for Gollum film, and no.
Hate it.
No.
I get it. He's over.
Vigo or nothing.
Yeah.
If you don't have Vigo, you don't put him in the movie. Plain as day. Don't do that. Correct. Vigo was the perfect Aragorn. He just had the charisma, the charm, the amazingness. You have an entire language that was created for the Lord of the Rings that Tolkien had created, and that was masterfully done in here with the Elvish language. I mean, multiple languages that were done, because you have that of Mordor, you have that of the elves and everything else. But yeah, it just you can't think of anybody else in these roles like John Rhys Davies being Gimli was such incredible. The guy's 6'1". He wasn't a small guy, but he was the one out of all of them. Like, how did they make him be like
Incredible.
There's times when you can tell it's CG to have the actor standing in front of others, but he was one of the biggest ones, even though he had so much problems with the allergies to the latex and everything else, that he was just incredible to see as Gimli and Orlando Bloom as Legolas. Like, nobody was miscast. Everybody was perfect. And you have Christopher Lee as Saruman, who just, he had met the only one of the cast who had met J.R.R. Tolkien, who had read the books every single year, and you get him in that with his deep voice and the menacing style. Like, no one was miscast. And then you add on top of that a score that is absolutely legendary, one of the greatest scores ever written for a film series, because it had so much weight and emotion and liveliness and love and hope and dread. It just carried every scene on this just magical and beautiful score that just accompanied the film like no other. The set designs, the costume designs, the weapon designs, just Weta, who this made them be a household name completely after this for practical and special effects. Like, they nailed every aspect of this film. Like, nothing was done wrong. You cannot say anything was really done wrong. Like, you can complain about stuff not being in there, characters not being in there that you wanted to see. They took and crafted and created a story that flowed beautifully, worked incredibly well together without feeling like it was missing anything. Like, if you, I've read all the books, I know what's missing, but I didn't care because they created this version of it that was so intricately and beautifully done. Like you said, it just got better. Fellowship of the Ring just took you on the adventure and set up the emotion and the characters, and you got the feeling of dread and really got the adventure going, and it felt like such an adventure. And then, you end, which it does feel like each film ends like 3 or 4 different times before we actually get to the end. I could do a little nitpicking on that, but it's so perfect outside of that I really can't nitpick it because I didn't care. Like, oh, you're giving me more? Thank you. Yeah. And going on, like you said, Two Towers brings up, taking us to the world of man and bringing in Mordor is starting its attack, and you're getting more of the dread and what it actually means that Sauron's forces are marching and everything that's going, and then Return of the King just bringing everything together and a gigantic battle at the end, but the emotion of this journey that they've gone on. And again, I've seen the people nitpick that. Did Frodo really throw the ring? Did he really accomplish his mission? Because it's Gollum who bites the ring off and falls in with it. So Frodo really didn't end up. Yeah, Frodo did it. Sam did it. They all did what they did.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. Everything done. But yeah, just every aspect of it was just unbelievably incredible, of the detail and the care and attention that they did. Like, it's just unmatched in the scale and the quality that they put out.
Agreed. And you summed it up perfectly. Like, everything in the films has a purpose. And one thing I want to give it credit for, if you never got to go on the journey of the films as they were being released into theaters, like say you didn't watch them until they all came out on DVD or Blu-ray, or you're late to the game and like appreciating Lord of the Rings, there was a noticeable fever pitch for these films as they were coming out, especially after the first one. The first one had a lot of success. It became a huge hit. But when you got to the second film and then even the third film, the fan anticipation kept crescendoing. And what I give them the most credit for is it paid off. Because there's so many times, how many times can you think about being so anticipatory of something, like a story coming out, a show coming out, a movie coming out, a game that you're looking forward to? How often are you met with disappointment because it didn't meet the expectations that you had set for it? Didn't have that problem with Lord of the Rings. This absolutely delivered. Obviously, Return of the King is the most critically successful of all of the films, won a ton of Oscars, deservedly so. It is still to this day tied for the most Oscar wins. And I know that's not the be all end all for a great film, but that's just a film like that is not supposed to win those awards. Like that genre of film classically does not get award love and nominees and buzz.
High lore fantasy
Correct.
films, yeah, they don't get the
They
nod.
don't get love in that realm of Hollywood normally. And it is still tied for the most Oscars ever given to a film of all time. That is how absolutely brilliant it was that they stuck the landing. And they got to it. They got there in the third one. The third one's a perfect movie. It's a perfect culmination of this world building, of this story. It doesn't miss any beats whatsoever. These films are notoriously long, but they never feel like they're dragging. And that's the beautiful part about these films is they do such a good job, like I said, world building, character progression, on the backdrop of some of the most gorgeous set pieces you've ever seen in your life. I still have a personal bucket list trip that I want to take to New Zealand to see where this is done. I'm going to ugly cry if I ever get to take it. Like I just know because it's just so visually beautiful and just incredibly well shot, and I'm just like, man, it's perfect. In my opinion, it is completely perfect from start to finish. There will never be. I will be surprised if there's ever a film trilogy that does everything so well from start to finish and lands in the way that it lands and such a satisfactory ending and just tells that complete story to a T. It's a full perfect circle story from start to finish. And it deserves its place at the top of our list of the greatest film trilogies of all time because it does. It's perfect in every sense of the word. I don't have the same nitpicks you did. I mean, the only thing you could talk about is maybe some of the little bits with Gollum weren't perfect. But even he got an incredible story out of it. And so much so that they're going back to them, put Aragorn in the frickin' movie or don't. But, like, even he's came full circle in that film. Like he became a relatable character. You felt sorry for him. You hated him, and then you felt sorry for him. Like they did such a good job of taking that journey with that character too. And like everybody gets quality screen time. Nobody, even the side characters, don't really feel like side characters. Side characters get full stories in this. Like this is about as fully fleshed out. If you love character development, watch The Lord of the Rings because you get it with so many characters. Arguably, the guy that gets the least amount of character development is Gandalf.
Yep.
Who's still an iconic. He goes from being Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White, and he has like a personal sacrifice to do that. But he arguably has the least character development. He's one of the best characters in the movie. You know what I mean? Like it does such a good job with all of it. And I can't give it enough praise. It is one of those I will watch over and over and over again and never get tired and find as much joy watching it now for the 50th time that I've seen the trilogy versus the first time I watched it. Like,
and you can talk about the impact that it's had on the industry too, because Gollum. You hadn't really had a CGI character have as much depth to it. This really skyrocketed motion capture and digital characters having more meaning to it. I mean, we got the Planet of the Apes with Andy Serkis that is revered for how good it is, and it used a motion capture to get more emotion out of the actors for the apes and everything in it. But Lord of the Rings is what really skyrocketed the industry, saying like, hey, we can really make dynamic digital characters because of what Andy Serkis did with Gollum, what they did with Gollum of motion capture, and being able to not just have a CGI character be in the background or be we need to do this giant scene and we got to replace our regular actors with something CGI and then bring them back. This was a fully CGI character, other than, when we got to see him as Schmeagol and everything else, that it's a fully CGI character that had heart and emotion and depth and hates potatoes and wants Wrigley rabbits and hates Samwise for cooking the rabbit and everything else. But you got emotion and you got depth, and it changed the industry because not only in film, motion capture is a gigantic part of video games now that's helping them make much more dynamic, in-depth video games, looking at the Last of Us series and more like that really shows off what motion capture can do. And Lord of the Rings is one that catapulted motion capture into being a legitimate way that you can make a digital character in film and video game and TV and everything else be legitimate characters because you have an actor actually, and Andy Serkis deserved more awards for what he
Agreed.
did as Gollum, because he did just as much, if not more, than anyone else there, because he's having to put on the ridiculous suit so that they can remove him later. But he's splashing around the water, rolling around,
Incredible.
doing everything that Gollum is doing, but he didn't get the credit he deserved.
Agreed.
At the time. He gets revered for it now, but at the time, they still weren't like, okay, well, why should he get awards or anything else for playing a digital character? It's just as much incredible work as someone playing them in person.
Agreed. And Andy Serkis is phenomenal, and I'm glad that he's getting the love he's getting now. But yeah, I mean, this is absolutely deserving of the top place. It's everything you want. It's phenomenal storytelling. It's great character development, unbelievable story, commercially successful. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise for a reason. Well-revered industry-wide. It's perfect, in my opinion. It's the best film trilogy ever made, and you would be hard-pressed to make an argument otherwise as far as like overall quality across 3 films. Yep. That is done so brilliantly that it's going to be hard for anybody to ever replicate, and have a good luck trying. Yep. You see so many people try that can almost get there, and we've talked about several of them to this point, but this is the one, in my opinion, that did it well and did it better, even better as it went along. Like, it started off really incredibly, because Fellowship of the Ring does get slept on a little bit, I think, as far as all of the 3, but it was still an incredible film, and it just kicked off so much incredible world building that you did throughout the course of 3 movies, and it's perfect. I have no other words.
Well, the last thing I really want to touch on this, it was just because not only the theatrical edition so incredible that that's what everyone got into as we saw these 3, well, they decided to go back and they're going to make extended edition of these films. And we've had different extended editions throughout the years, and most of them didn't really add much to the films. They didn't really do much more. There's some, like the Ben Affleck Daredevil is actually a little bit better because of that director's cut they did. Sure. But you've gone back and forth with extended editions and director's cuts. Are they really better than the original films? Were they worth doing it? And this is one of the rare examples where, as incredible as the theatrical editions are, 90% of the people, if not more now, will say the extended editions are their favorite part of this, that they go, even though they add like 3 hours of watch time between all 3 films together, that's the definitive editions now, is that you had 3.5 hour movies, and now you're adding 30 to 45 minutes more to each film. Okay, now they're each clocking in around 4 hours. They're well worth it. They're the greatest. They're the greatest example of an extended cut or director's cut, just adding even more. Because as you said, we know just how vast and expansive the Middle Earth lore is. And adding even more to it, you can say, well, when you're getting into 4 hours, it could just drag. Sure. But it doesn't. Most people, when they talk about Lord of the Rings anymore now, are talking about the extended editions and not the theatrical editions, which is just an incredible thing to see. Like, they did so well in theaters, and they were so incredible in the original cut. How did you possibly make it even better?
Yeah, and they find a way.
With the extended editions.
They find a way. I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did. And watch both versions. Draw your own conclusions of it, but both on their own stand, phenomenal. I can't say anything less. I'm so glad we were in agreement on that. It wasn't a hard argument to make either one for either one of us, but I'm glad we got to kind of nerd out and talk about why we love it as much as we do, but very deserving in its place at number 1.
Yeah, just absolutely incredible trilogy. That's almost, you've got 2 trilogies out of it. You got the theatrical and you got the extended edition.
Correct. Which
both are incredible in their own right, and it was one of those shocking ones where the extended editions just
made it better.
Managed to go even better, even though you already had 3 hours worth of movie each.
It took perfect and made it perfecter.
Like you said, just the actors, the score, the design of everything, the way it was put together, there was no aspect of any of these 3 films that were done badly.
Agreed.
Everything was perfection.
Agreed.
And it changed the industry in many ways of how they looked at fantasy films and how they looked at digital actors and how they looked at a lot of different things. It changed a lot because this could have been seen as very risky, because you're taking a very high fantasy story, a very older high fantasy story, and you're making it 3.5 hours each in theaters, it really could have been looked at and balked on that it was going to be bad, but instead it become one of the biggest impactful film trilogies I've watched in ever. Like, it's had such a huge impact on me with my likes and everything else of just seeing the Lord of the Rings story being told in near perfection. Again, they didn't tell everything in the books. We would have, and I'm down for it, like 24 to 30 hours of Lord of the Rings there, but
it's hard to get a lot of people on board.
They did what they had to do and what they needed to do in such a perfect way. Perfect casting, perfect score, perfect set design, perfect everything. Like, nothing was out of place. No one was out of place. Everyone did their job phenomenally. There's nothing negative I can say about this film trilogy. It is just perfect.
To find all of the episodes of We'll Bring the Popcorn, go to our YouTube page, hit the like and subscription button so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room on any of the podcasting platforms that we're on, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And don't forget to go to We'llBringThePopcorn.com, where it has all of our archive videos, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store, so you continue to support the show in that way. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support.